Hey guys, Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic here. Welcome to the channel. If you guys are new, welcome. We have the E30 N54 behind me. Today, we are picking up where we left off on the first start. Last weekend we had a great weekend. We got the first start on the first try. It was an amazing feat. Very little troubleshooting, if any at all, as I methodically went and installed and started and wired up this engine for its first crank and first start. Excellent time. I'm so happy. Now we can build on that. But we are going to shift gears a little bit and start working on suspension. Today's episode is brought to you by CATuned, or as many in the enthusiast community know it as CATuned, right? They make everything from suspension components to bushings to steering components for E30, E28, E24, a lot of older E30, older BMWs, E36, E46, E39, basically all of those generations. They are an amazing supplier for all those types of things. If you are ever interested, take a look at what they have to offer. They are a great company to work with and work for. So guys, I wanted to take this old Roddy suspension and I wanted to upgrade it with the CATuned Coilovers front and rear. We're gonna focus on that today. You don't wanna miss it, guys. Thanks. So here we got the CATuned front and rear coilover suspension for the BMW E30 with the added option of the upgraded E36 M3 sway bar. These guys basically thread onto the existing strut housing and they attach to the E36 M3 sway bar, which uses these custom sized links that connect to the top and of course on the bottom. And we'll install that today as well. But we want to focus on the front first, get the front done. We're going to need to take off the existing strut housing and weld this puppy onto it. And after that, it should be pretty straightforward. So let's first go on and remove all this front suspension on the front, including the control arm, and then start cutting the strut housing. Okay, we got our front struts with the control arms basically sitting here. These control arms are actually in pretty good condition, so I am not going to be replacing them. I will be updating the bushings in another episode. For now, we need to get the control arms separated from the spindle. Now it's a 22 millimeter, and the idea is that you put it on there, you unscrew it, and then you use what's called a whatever it is. This is like a puller. It's basically a tie rod pusher. And the more you screw this in, the more pressure it puts on the bolt, and it squeezes it right out of the spindle, which is like a 7-degree tapered spindle. And it just basically pops it off. I've used this all the time. I use it many times. In fact, I actually broke the bolt on it once, so I had to put a new bolt in it. It works really well. So let me show you how to do that real quick. So first, all you gotta do is just spin the nut off. Go. And then you want to take this puppy, loosen it up, get it to squeeze right in there, and it'll fit. It'll fit just fine. This guy here is a 24 millimeter. You just put your 24 millimeter on your impact. Make sure it's pushed in enough that you have enough seated surface area contact between the actual bolt and the puller, and then you just go to town. Watch out, it really blows up at you, so you just have to kind of watch it. Woo! There we go. One down, one to go. We can then start measuring from the base up. The measurement is 50 millimeters from the base. And that way, these guys, these are the sleeves that came with the CATuned kit. They slide over, and then you lay your bead of weld over that. So we need to cut these and slide it over. We need to clean all the surfaces to make a really good metal-to-metal surface contact, and then weld her up. Got both of the spindles cut, and this whole little area here that I'm going to be welding right in this little location, this is the spindle here, and this guy is going to end up slipping over this sleeve, and it's going to be butted up right just against that. So this will all need to be cleaned and smoothed out of any burrs or anything like that, because this is a very, very tight, close fit. So I need to basically sandblast inside of this location. I need to sandblast this as well, and that allows for a really good location for weld right in that junction. Okay, we ran into a little bit of a problem. After I had sandblasted them, rather, this one actually was pretty well behaved. In fact, when you push this sleeve on, it is very nice and square. So it makes for a perfect weld. And what we need to do is before we weld it, we need to clamp everything down nice and straight. We use the jaw horse for that. But this is actually completely done and ready to go. The setup is perfectly square. Here we have a bit more of an issue. And I don't understand why. I think it's just a function of the casting perhaps. But this side is actually different. Now if you try slipping this guy over, you'll see that it actually does go. But look at that. It doesn't even come close to bottoming out. Why is that? Because the actual strut housing is now hitting on this section of the casting. So what I need to do is cut and grind that little section out there, and then make sure that this thing sits flush. Because if I don't, then the offset, the height of this is going to be different than the height of that, or the offset of this guy is going to be different, and the angle is going to be different. So I don't want that. I want this to be perfectly identical. So I need to cut with a Sawzall very slowly and craftily, and basically level that area out so that I can get this thing to fit flat on this edge. All right, so I basically was able to get as much of this metal out as I possibly could to try to level off the surface, and I made significant progress. It is not perfect. So what I need to do is, let's see if this guy kind of sits more or less like that. On this side, it actually looks pretty good. On this side, I still need to do a little bit more. What I'm gonna end up doing is welding this guy, because this guy is as straight as an arrow. I'm going to weld this guy up, and I'm going to record the angular measurements of this, and then I'm going to compare it and get that one to sit exactly at the same exact angle as this one. So let's tack this one up, and then let's start recording the measurements. Okay, so installing these sleeves onto the actual spindles is not necessarily as easy as you might find on other YouTube stations. Because the casting is different, I did have to shave off some of the inside amount in order to get a nice level stance. And then when I did, I needed to make sure that it was flat and even, and both spindles were exactly the same. And that's why I have this set up here rigged, to make sure that this side, this is the one that, that sat nice and flat. So this guy has been tacked and is ready to be compared against where this guy will end up getting finally welded, so that it matches that of this as closely as possible. Obviously, there's a lot of slop that can be made up for at the upper spring perches where you do your camber adjustment, but I wanted to make sure that I was close as possible when we do our initial alignment, so that I don't get too far on one edge or the other. So I got 2 out of the 3 axes completely secured. Okay, I put the magnet here on the bottom of the spindles for the steering column, for the steering rods, and I was able to measure that these 2 are exactly opposite of each other in terms of angular displacement. And I obviously have them in the same plane here for rotor alignment, so I know that they are aligned in that way as well. There's only one additional degree of freedom, and that is the back and forth, which is essentially camber. And I need to measure the angle of this one that's set and make sure that it's exactly the same as the angle on this one, and then give it a couple of light tacks, one on either side of the bottom of the spindle, because if you do too much on one side, it'll end up warping. And a tiny bit of warpage at the base of the weld will make a much bigger difference 2 or 3 feet away from that weld. So you gotta make sure that you don't put too much heat into the part as you're welding them. Okay, this guy's sitting here at about 1.1 degrees tilted like that. I made sure that that one is also tilted the same amount of degrees in the opposite direction. And having said that, let's take a look and see where this falls. You're about 80.3 degrees, right? So if I were to take this, just to check this guy really quick, I'm pretty close. I mean, if I were to maybe, yeah, go 1, perfect. So that's as close as I think I'm gonna be able to get. If I could just take this guy, put it on like that, tilt it, I'm right at around 81 degrees, which is really, really close. So if I just take this and tilt it just a tiny bit more at the base here, I'm at 80.6, which is very, very, very close. So then I want to take a look at both sides here and eye them up. They look very, very close if you look at like the profiles. These guys are in very, very close proximity. So all I want to do is just basically lay like 1 or 2 tacks, one here, and then one on the opposite side to prevent any type of warpage, and then see exactly where they fall, and then see if I need to cut something or you know, cut and re-weld or whatever. So I know that this is taking a long time, but you know, it has to be as precise as possible in order to make sure that the two are as equal to each other as possible. And that's challenging. That's challenging because the castings are different. It didn't just slip right on, and it didn't just come across like that. So, you know, I had to cut the casting, and I had to make sure that it sat as flat as possible. And then even still, there's just a tiny bit of play. There's a tiny bit of play here between this guy and then down here. So it moves. It does move, and you need to make sure that you weld it in the right position the first time, or else you're going to have alignment issues on your car. So do it right. Do it the first time and do it right. All right, both sleeves have been welded onto the spindles. I welded as much around the entire circumference of the sleeve as possible. Started welding at the higher mass, which is the casting, and drew it over onto the sleeve. Welds actually turned out pretty good. I'm pretty impressed. I used a lot of heat. I actually used a lot of wire speed too, so hopefully that really helps to solidify the integrity of this system. Very, very important to make sure you have good welds here. Now that this is complete, I want to basically protect the welds from rust and corrosion by pour-15ing them, get them installed onto the front of the car, and work on getting the front sway bar installed with the front links and getting that connected to the front sway bar link adapter on the actual coilover and see how everything sits. So let's do that right now. The E36 M3 front sway bar mounts up into these locations here that were welded up. So I do need to install the sway bar, and then that's it, I think, for now, until we continue to move on. But for you, it'll be seamless. It'll be seamless. So yeah, let's get that front sway bar installed. This is the E36 M3 front sway bar. It is 30 millimeters. It is pretty thick, and it'll be perfect for our N54 swap. We've already installed the sway bar. We've already test fitted everything to look good. Now we have our poly bushings, and before we install it, we need to get our lube installed onto the outer sleeve of the sway bar, and then basically clamp the bushing on that, and then the whole sway bar just installs. So it's always good practice to use lube, grease, before putting any type of bushing contact, or else you're gonna get squeaks. And if you get squeaks, it's gonna be really annoying, and you're just gonna need to fix it later anyway. So we're gonna put the lube on, be generous with it, and then we're going to install the sway bar. All right, the front sway bar is now installed, and just need to install the front spindles, and then I can get everything else hooked up. Now remember, the sway bar link here is going to end up going right over here, right? Just like that. It's going to point up like that though, right? And then the other end goes into this threaded location here, right here, where it's going to end up going into that. Now the difference is that this actually has a set screw in here, So the set screw, once you have it in your location, because this is threaded, so you have to thread it up and down as you want it, adjust your height. Once you have the height set, then you just adjust and screw that set screw in, and then you can finish your installation. So it's pretty slick the way that they did that there. Pretty nice. In fact, there's a pretty good view of it here. You can see that it just basically puts pressure on that, that inner fork there, and it kind of puts pressure on the threads. Pour 15, the spindles, completed all the welding, installed the shock housing, and I did not make any adjustments. I made sure to put the front upper sway bar perch on there, and we are going to install it in here. Installation should take just a few minutes, and then when we do, we can just make our minute adjustments and at least get that far, and then we can move on to the back. But after we do that, let me explain to you how this works. Okay, so both sides are now installed. There is a lot of adjustability into these coilovers. And then the E30 M3 sway bar, which is also installed, adds an additional layer of adjustability with the sway bar link being adjustable in terms of its length by screwing the tie rod in and out. It expands and contracts them. Now, I ended up just basically picking a location that I wanted to set it at, and I had this thread threaded into the sleeve quite a bit. It's been threaded in about I don't know, 5 or 6 inches. It took me a while to thread it in, but I did, and I tightened it down and just picked. And this is the part that's actually the height adjustable part of this front coilover, which is nice. So you have your height adjustability. This is really not an adjustable location. You don't really want to adjust this thread. This guy is adjustable, so you can move this up and down by unscrewing the tie rod, the sway bar link, and then screwing it in. If you want it higher or lower, that's fine too. The sway bar actually has adjustability too. There's 2 holes on the sway bar, depending on how sporty you want it. The closer you are to the point of rotation over here, the sportier it's going to feel, with the less lean you're going to get in a turn. So this is actually a less sporty setting, but I can always and very easily move it to the other hole anytime. As far as the top goes, well, this is a little messy. Let's go over here. As far as the top goes, there is adjustability for your shocks in terms of your dampener, and you can go soft or harder. This is basically what the adjuster looks like. Push it in there, and there's 4 of them, 1 for each corner, and you can leave them in there, or you can take it out and put it in your glove box or whatever. But there's like a detent here, so you can feel and hear the detent as you're screwing it in. Harder for right hand, and left hand is softer, and it really does make a difference. I have it on my E30, V80 30, and it makes a really big difference. The final level of adjustability that you get with these coilovers is camber, and there are 4 5mm Allen wrenches, Allen keys that you can loosen up, and you can move this whole set over one way or the other, depending on what kind of camber you want at the actual the wheel. So I have not touched the camber adjustment, and I know that there's going to be a lot of adjustability here, so I want to just make sure that I get it set somewhere, and no matter where that is, that both left and right sides are exactly the same. And then when I make adjustments, I know that I can make both adjustments the same. Whatever I do to the left side, I can do the same to the right side. So that does it for the front, guys. And now let's start tackling the rears. We are going to be doing a full rear refresh on this, just like the fronts. We're going to be using all new bushings. We're going to be doing all new shocks and springs, California tuned shocks and adjustable springs on the actual trailing arms. We're not going to be doing the shock spring mount together as a full coilover on the rear because of, I just don't want to put too much pressure on the upper shock mount on the actual chassis. I don't think that's necessary, at least not for this car. So we're just going to be doing a separate spring shock combination. Yeah, we're just going to be doing a full refresh on the rear. Installing the springs is easy enough. You have your lower spring perch, right? You have your lower adjustable section, right? So basically can adjust higher or lower. And then you screw these two against each other in order to tighten it to the level you want. This sits nicely on top of that perch. And then the spring goes on. Let's get this a little lower. Just like that. Make sure that the shock gets installed as well. And you're basically done. Shock installed, spring installed. Very, very easy. All right, now that this suspension is completely installed on the rear and on the front and somewhat height adjusted to the best of my ability, it is time to throw the wheels on and get this thing on the ground and just see how it fits. Now, when we set this on the ground for the first time, it's going to be a little bit higher probably than I expect, but that's because the springs do need to settle out. So I do want to afford just maybe about a ½ inch of room when I put it down on the ground to allow for settling after it's on, and then drive it around. So yeah, let's just do it. Let's put this thing on the ground. First try, not so bad. I mean, the rears, let's talk about the rears first. I mean, that's the ride height for the rear. I actually kind of like that ride height. I'm actually probably gonna end up going just a little bit lower. But like I said earlier with the settling, I think that that's where I wanna start and then easily adjust later. And looking at the other side, it's very close to being the same. So I'm actually going to leave the rear alone because I think that it's actually pretty good. I think that with a slightly beefier tire, I think that would actually feel quite nicely. The front we're dealing with a little bit more complicated suspension geometry. I do like the way that this is kind of tucked in a little bit. So the left front wheel is actually in pretty good shape, honestly. I like the way that it's sitting right now. I like the height. But obviously is going to need a pretty significant alignment because this wheel here is actually towed out to the right. You can see that here. But the ride height of this guy is probably just a little bit low for my taste. It's going to really bend in the corners, and when you end up making a right-hand turn, it's going to end up chomping away at either the tire or the fender. So I really am not a big fan of that. So I'm going to end up raising the right rear a little bit, and I want to bring it in a little bit in terms of front end alignment. So, but overall, I mean, let's take a look at the ground clearance. Come on. So you can see the ground clearance isn't so bad. It looks like it's about 3 inches maybe, 3 inches of ground clearance there. So I'm actually, I know it looks a lot lower than it really is, but it's not that low. So I kind of like it. So that's why I do want to raise up that right front just a tiny bit. So let me raise it up and then we'll do a final review. Let's take another look here. All right, tire's definitely been pulled in a little bit, which is good. There's definitely a lot more front end alignment that needs to happen. There's a lot of adjustability on these CATuned coilovers, so I really need to get into the detail of the alignment after we start going for drives. But this does look a lot better. The ground, from the ground to the underside of the fender, that lip right there was 23.25 on this side, 23.5 on that side. So yeah, further proof that I did need to raise this up just a bit, but I do like the way this looks. I think that it looks really nice and aggressive. I might raise it up a tiny bit more, but we'll see how it all settles out after we drive. All right, guys, that just about does it for this episode of the E30 N54. Behind me, we did the complete suspension installation with CATuned parts, coilovers, fully adjustable, and guys, they do a really great customer service. I'm telling you, they answer my phone call whenever I had a question. Igor did a great job of explaining to me how the front sway bar mounts work and how to adjust the coilovers and how to make it all work. So there's a lot of coilover options out there for the E30, but CATuned really offers that extra level with their customer service, and I am proud to have worked with them. Thank you so much, guys, for everything that you've done for me throughout the installation of this over the last week. If you guys are interested in a set of nice coilovers, California Tuned offers a really cool set. Very good quality, and you can definitely race with them. I raced in my E30 at 62 behind me on the track at Buttonwillow, and it held up to the task. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please smash that like button, smash the subscribe button if you like what I'm doing, if you like me, if you like the videography. Other than that little spot up there that you can see, that is a weld mark on the lens of my GoPro 8. Yes, wonderful. I'm so glad that it's there, and I hope it doesn't bother you too much. But yes, I'm going to work on that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic, and I am out of here till next time. Later.